Adiyami Musavada Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami Surameraya Majjapama Datthana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami Tisaranena saddhing panchasilang dhamman sadhukang surakkitang katnva appamadena sampade tabbang samanta cakkhavalesu atta gaccantu devatha saddhammang munirajassa sunantu sagga mokkadang dhammassavana kālo ayang bhadanta dhammassavana kālo ayang bhadanta dhammassavana kālo ayang bhadanta namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Good evening, everyone. Today we are going to have a Dhamma session. And this is the second session we are conducting in English. And first we had in Melbourne, one, right? In a house of Mr. Dayanath's house. Yeah. And this is the second session. First of all, this is the first time I'm visiting Australia. And I visited my brother and also my relatives, some of my relatives, friends, and also devotees, invited by Tilu Disanak and Taraka Vitanage, and very well organized by them. I'll be visiting Brisbane tomorrow, and then again then New Zealand, and then finally we'll go back to Sri Lanka on 31st of May, right? So I was planning to give my talk today on opening insight towards Buddhism and giving some insights based on not proving, but a possibility of why one should pursue or study Buddhism thoroughly, and why does it make sense. First of all, I have to make sure that we cannot prove what Buddha has said. In terms of skepticism, it's very difficult to prove anything. It's very difficult to prove anything. For example, if someone argues that we are in a very long dream, that we have still yet to wake up, you can never prove it wrong. Because you cannot prove a dream unless you wake up. Right? So there is a special argument in skepticism. If you want to prove the past experiences that you had, either you rely upon testimony. Testimony means information given by others, or based on your own memory. So we have to rely that our memory is correct, right? How do you rely our memory is correct? Is there a way to prove that? Have you ever thought about it? I once thought, for example, I had a memory about something in the past, and then it happened to be true. So I say it was true. But that proof itself is another memory, right? So you prove memory based on memory, which is called a circular argument, which is not a very good proof. Sometimes, in order to prove memory, you take testimony. For example, when I was a child, my teacher used to say I had a good memory, for example, or I have good skills. I was intelligent. And later on, I remember that, vaguely remember that, for example. And still later on, even now, someone would say, okay, you are intelligent. And I take it as a proof to show my memory was correct. Then you have to prove the testimony made by the teacher or made by the other person is true. Then you go to prove the testimony. Testimony is someone says something. Someone says something is there. So how do you prove the testimony? Testimony means information given by someone else. One day someone has told me something and it had become true. So I remember that. You prove testimony based on your memory again. So again you come into the same loop. You prove memory either based on memory, you prove memory either based on testimony, you prove testimony based on memory. This is called a skeptical argument. So according to them, you cannot even prove that even the basic things that we are experiencing, if you keep on arguing like that. So what we do is, we rely on a lot of common sense. We rely ourselves on our experiences. So Buddha was a teacher who solely gave his teachings based on direct experience, which we call introspecting. The direct most experience one can have is observing your own mind. You observe your own mind and explain what you feel. Normally psychologists do this, right? Sigmund Freud was very famous for this. But later on, in 1920s, around something like that, in the 20th century, my memory, I cannot trust my memory sometimes, right? In the US system, this was taken out. Because why? How could you trust the observation of a subjective observation of some person? You have to test whether he was sane, whether he's telling the truth, whether he's having the real experience. Is he capable of expressing or putting it into words as he experienced? Is his expression is accurate? So they ruled it out as a scientific method. But according to Buddhism, always keep it in mind, we praise one of the qualities of Dhamma, Paccattang Veditabbo Vinyuhi. What does it mean? This is a doctrine or this is a reality that should be known by the wise by themselves and which cannot be proven to others. Understanding that you gain in Buddhism cannot be shown to others. If you are wearing a necklace, it can be seen by others, right? You can prove it, you can show it. Even others can benefit out of it. Oh, it's a nice, because you can enjoy it. But the attainments that you get in Buddhism, that you attain or garner in Buddhism, are only for the attainer, not for others. Therefore, in order to gain, only the ones who practice would gain benefits out of the doctrine the Buddha had taught. And it is a subjective experience which cannot be empirically proven. It cannot be shown to the world. It cannot be shown on a projector. It's a subjective thing. Therefore, we are entering into a very special realm called the non-material realm, the conscious realm. And Buddhism is solely based on this aspect. I also have to admit that if someone, with a big if someone is capable of disproving the possibility of consciousness, that's the end of Buddhism. Buddhism solely based on consciousness. Buddhism is not based on ethics. What is the uniqueness of the Buddha? So I'm getting an entrance. You must be wondering where Bhante is heading towards. I'm getting an entrance and I'm going to give you a certain insight and to show you why it is important to study Buddhism and why it is not a dogma. And to arouse interest within you, to have deeper studies on it, and to show the realm where the doctrine is behaving or existing. It's not based on ethics mainly. Ethics plays a pivotal role in Buddhism, but it is not the center. A very central concept in Buddhism is rebirth. If there's no rebirth, you don't need the teachings of a Samma Sambuddha. The sole aim of a Samma Sambuddha is to prevent the rebirth. If there's no rebirth, you don't need such a teaching. The reason is, do you need a rebirth to have ethics? No, surely not. You can be a good person even without believing a rebirth. You can still have empathy. Seems like the countries that are most livable are in non-Buddhist countries, right? Right? They have a lot of ethics. I think you yourself have first-hand experience on that. In order to have ethics, you don't need to have a rebirth. And it's not that you follow ethics only because of rebirth, no. Then what is the uniqueness of Buddhism? There are other doctrines that emphasized on the rebirth and said that you have to do good things in order to be born in a good destination or a good place after life, after birth, after death. Let's go afterlife. And it also made sense. Why is that? They advocated lives which have a longer length than the human life. And it was really appealing. Okay, if you're talking about thousands of years in a divine realm and thousands of years in a woeful realm, and just because of enjoying or living for 70, 80, 90 years in a human realm, and if you are destined to, or if you are going to suffer in a long reigning realm, just because of the behaviors or conducts that I or you have been doing in this short life, it makes sense to to be aware of what we do before we get into this longer lives. Because in case if there is a life, and if it happens to be the next life is full of agony, we are going to experience a terrible, woeful hell of a time. So then it's better to be ethical or to live a good life, so we'll have a long life after death. So that was the appealing part. The lives after death are mostly longer than this human life, and they are extraterrestrial, mostly beyond the human scope, human observation. And this was really appealing to humans. The Buddha was advocating something different than that. Yes, he strongly believed in rebirth. No argument in it. Some do try to emphasize that the Buddha preached a doctrine without a rebirth. There is a Buddhism in India in which some believe there is no rebirth in Buddhism. It's a very famous figure, famous politician who advocated this, and still some believe in a Buddhism where there is no rebirth. According to them, jati means the constant arising in this very life. For us, which is utterly against the pure teachings or the authentic teachings of the Buddhism. So we are not going to talk about that. So as we understand, as most of us understand, Buddhism advocates a rebirth, a life after death. Then he also advocated this life after, this process of being born after dying keeps on happening as long as the causes are prevailing. This keeps on happening. And in every life, we experience certain dissatisfactions. So therefore, and this would never end as long as the causes are prevailing. So it's better to end this round of cycles of births. That was the main aim, main goal, the Buddha, main teachings the Buddha gave. And he also added something very new. He also said, even though one is born after death, there is no soul that transmigrates from life to life. It's a very unique position. Some teachings advocated there is a soul which would end up at the death. Some said the soul could exist after death, survive the death, and transmigrate from life to life. And some said there is no self, so it has to end in this very life. Buddha took the fourth stance, a stance that I haven't encountered yet in philosophy. There is no self, but there is rebirth. It's a very bold stand that he took. So this is the uniqueness of Buddhism. So in Buddhism, there is rebirth, there is no self, there is causality. Because of this, this happens. Because of this, this happens. So this is the realm. This is the realm. So therefore, we have to keep in mind, Buddha taught a doctrine in which rebirth was pivotal. There's no self, still rebirth is happening. And also there is a very important phenomena called causality. Because of this, this happens. Because of this karma that one has done, something new happens. This is the basic idea. And all this can be known only through introspect, not through objective analysis or objective observation. It cannot be proven. Don't come into a hurry and say science is proving Buddhism. I have to say this to you. Some in a hashtag I have seen saying, science is proving Buddhism. No, it will never happen to my understanding. Because science is empirically proving or objective reality. Buddhism is proven subjectively, and it's proven only to yourself. It cannot be shown to others. It cannot be experimentally shown to others. Now, this is the introduction. So with this introduction, I move into the main scope of Buddhism, and to say that why it makes sense in the materialistic world. Why it makes sense. So I'm going to ask you a question. Are we in a determined future or not? What do you think? No. Some says no. Can we change global warming? Can we change global warming? Can we change the destiny of the world? Yes. A young boy was answering, yes. Can we change? If we make determination, if we change the course of the world, can we do it? Can we make efforts? Yes. Some says no because they don't believe in the system. That's why. That's why you are saying no, right? Right? But if we try, we can, right? We could, right? As human beings, can't we change the course of life in our future lives? Yes. We do believe, right? According to the laws of modern physics, keep this in mind. According to the laws of modern physics, if you are to change the future of the world or of yourself, given all the laws of modern physics that that humans are aware of, if you want to change the course of the life or the future, there has to be one thing. There has to be an immaterial element. That can influence the matter. I don't know whether you have thought about it or not. I'm just giving you an insight. I'm not teaching about how to meditate in this talk, okay? If you expected that, very sorry for that. Right? I'm giving you some insights. Think about Buddhism. According to modern science, we are made out of 17 particles. 6 quarks, 6 leptons, 4 force-carrying bosons, a special boson called Higgs boson, and a Higgs field. This is the standard model. They consider this could be the final destination, but some physicists are optimistic that they will be able to break the quarks and go further. But anyway, this is the standard model that they have at the moment. And they have few forces: electromagnetism, gravity. They have the strong force and the weak force. Given all these and taking all them into a soup, if you analyze all these laws in the entire universe, according to this modern physics, most of the modern physics, you can determine the course of the future 100%. Brain is a part of it, just a part of it. Every physical activity that occurs in the world is determined by another physical activity. And this has been proven with general relativity and special relativity. It breaks down when it goes to the quantum level, because randomnism is working, but it doesn't apply when it comes to the levels beyond atom. So every moment can be predicted. So if you are a materialistic, please keep it in mind. You are advocating determinism. If you ever have a slight hope of change in the future, there has to be, I'm asserting this. And many philosophers, almost everyone in the Western philosophy would agree with me, though it's very bitter, though they are materialistics. If you want to change the course of the future, if you want to get out of determinism, there has to be an immaterial element that could influence the material. Otherwise, no way out. Otherwise, it's a closed system. That's how we call it. It's a closed system. Given the laws of conservation of energy, the causal closure, the system is closed. Starting from the Big Bang, or if it was not the Big Bang. Even if the Big Bang theory was wrong, even the universe had an eternal beginning, it didn't have a beginning. Still, if there is only matter in the world, the future could be predicted 100%. Our inability to predict doesn't mean that it is not determined. Inability is something else. If, in case, a super computer or a super being like God could understand the entire mechanism of all the particles and the forces interacting in the entire universe, or at least the part of a universe, he or she or it could be able to determine the entire course of that region, of that entire universe. And there's only one outcome in causality. You cannot have two outcomes. You may think that I'm in a haste to say this. No. Given the modern laws of physics, you can do all the research, you can do all the internet searching. According to physics, if there's only matter, you cannot get out of determinism. There's a very nice philosopher, Western philosopher, who says, I believe in materialism, but I wish dualism is true. I wish there is a consciousness. Why? That's the only way you can have free will. That's the only way. Free will means you have a choice. Choice means you can change the future. So now, it's up to you whether to decide whether you want to change the future of the world, if you want to change the future of the government, future of the health sector, future of the construction fields, future of the education fields, whatever it is. If you are willing, if you are desirous, if you think we are heading towards somewhere that we should not be heading, we should be heading somewhere else. If you at least have such a desire, if you think it's not determined, if you are desirous that this could be changed, and if you adhere to the laws of physics, and if you respect them, please keep it in mind. Unconsciously, you are believing in a consciousness, immaterial thing that could influence the matter. I'll repeat again. every happening of the material realm is determined by a prior cause. It could be a simultaneous cause, but still those causes are determined by some other prior causes. There can be a huge array of causes. True, but everything has its cause. When you take the entirety into consideration, that's the point. If you focus only on a part, you may say there's randomism, there is uncertainty. No, if you take the entire thing, because this part is influenced by another region, and this part is influenced by another region, all are happening due to causes. In the material realm, in a given status, the positioning of the matter and the forces would determine the outcome of the next nanosecond or the moment. And that would determine the next moment. That would determine the next moment. This is called infinite regression. You can keep on going. Not regression, actually. Further. If we at least have an idea of changing the future, it can only be done because we are heading towards here. So we are thinking of changing it. You have to change the cause of the matter against the causes. Because we are heading, we say, if we go like this, we are heading towards such a global warming. We are heading towards an economic crisis. So we want to change it. So you have to influence the matter in the end. You have to influence the matter. If it is another matter, that matter is also governed by another cause. So still you are in the pool of the determined rule, determined thing. Nothing new is going. New change has to occur. This, what I'm saying, is utterly against the physical laws. That I have to admit. What I'm saying has never been proven. But if we have an idea, if we believe in a non-deterministic future, there has to be a new change. And that change has to come from a non-material element, which you cannot detect from the scientific equipment. And its decisions could not be 100% predicted. That's the point here. Could not be 100% predicted. Very accurately predicted. At least you have to have at least the probability only. Only then you can change the future. And that non-material element should be able to make a decision. Why is that? We see we are heading towards this direction and we want it to head towards this, so we are taking a decision. It's a decision-making non-material element. We call it causal agent in philosophy. This non-material, non-physical decision-making causal agent should be able to influence the physicality and change the cause that seems to be having a different destination. Only then you are able to change the course of the future. So we are entering now Buddha verse of this idea. Why do I say so? Once he saw a poor man, a beggar, who was begging with his wife near a wall in Savatthi. Then he said to Ananda, Ananda, do you see these beggars? This couple, beggar couple, yes, begging couple. They were once a rich family. Given their wealth, had they invested this money in proper industries, they would have been the number one richest family in the city. Given their past merits in samsara, had they ordained, the husband would have been arahant, while the wife would have been anagami. Okay, had they done the same in the Middle Ages, they would have been the second richest family. Husband would have been, if they ordained, would have been anagami. Wife would have been sakadagami. Had they done the same in the last age, they would have been the third richest family. Husband would have been a sakadagami. Wife would have been a sotapanna had they ordained. But now they didn't took any of these steps. There were 6 outcomes. 6 possible outcomes. Investing in the prime ages, ordaining in the prime ages. Investing in the Middle Ages, becoming recluses in the Middle Ages. Investing in the final ages, last ages, or becoming monks in the last ages. So 6 possibilities. They didn't follow any of them. And they ended up squandering all their money, and they ended up being 2 beggars who were begging, and according to the doctrine, they ended up in a woeful realm after death because they couldn't make their money. They were gambling and enjoying the wealth too much, and they were living a very lavish life. They spent their old money and also didn't develop any spiritual qualities within themselves. So Buddha always emphasized on possibilities and probabilities. He would always say, if this monk practices hard, he has the potency to become arahant. If this monk practices hard, he has the potency to become, if he practices to this level, he would end up being an anagami, not an arahant. So he always sees a possibility or a probability in the future, a probabilistic future. What does it mean? The future can be changed. In order for the future to change, there has to be the immaterial element. And that immaterial element is called vijnana in Buddhism, which we call consciousness. And this consciousness cannot be tested in terms of material technology because it's immaterial. It has to be like a ghost haunting the matter. Therefore, Ryle, Gilbert Ryle, a behaviorist, mockingly termed dualists, like we, Buddhists. Consciousness, the doctrine of consciousness in a body, making the body to move. It's like a ghost in a machine. Ghost cannot be tested. You say the machine is working, and you don't know why. You are saying a ghost is moving it. Prove it to me. Very sorry, cannot. But it's moving. How can you prove consciousness? Introspectum. Now I'm come to the realm of consciousness. So my argument, I'll also explain what was my method of arguing. What I did was, I never proved consciousness, and I will never be able to prove consciousness. I'll never be able to disprove materialism. No, impossible. So it means science will never be able to prove Buddhism, and Buddhism will never be able to disprove science or prove science. No. These are 2 different doctrines. These are 2 different doctrines that can never merge together. So what I have done is, I have to admit what I have done. I have talked to sort of viewer emotions. Because most of the people would say, future cannot be determined. Because it doesn't make sense. The life doesn't make sense if it is determined. And scientifically, if life doesn't make sense, scientifically, in order to get out of determinism, it's a proven fact. There has to be a non-material element that could influence the matter, which could take decisions. So I've used this. This is my way of what I have done. Not proven consciousness or anything. So naturally, the ones who has a desire or a belief towards a future, non-deterministic future, would think, okay, then why don't we explore the consciousness? What the Buddha has said about the consciousness. Okay, does it make sense? How do you feel it? How do you understand it? Now we are entering into that realm. There are a lot of more arguments about this. Mary's thought experiment, Chinese room experiment. There are a lot of arguments. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not giving a philosophy talk, though it seems like a philosophy talk till now. So now I'm entering into the realm of consciousness, the immaterial realm of consciousness, which is not the matter, which is immaterial. So what the Buddha has talked about this? Buddha has said this immaterial element has the ability to take objects, to know object, to cognize object, awareness. It has the capacity to know. It's a very strange element. How can it be known? It can be known through subjective experience. It can be felt. The consciousness can feel itself. How it feels cannot be detected by an objective instrument. Sometimes, when we are at sorrow, others would say, yes, I can understand you. I can understand your pain. What do you think? Can they really feel how we feel when we are heartbroken? No, obviously not. It's something internal, right? It's something for yourself. You can express, you can explain how I feel, but it's an internal realm. It is for you, only for you. This is what we call subjective experience. There's a very nice statement given by a philosopher. You can examine the bat's brain. You can explain its functioning. But you can never explain how a bat feels. You can explain the mechanism. Yes, you can. But you cannot explain how it feels. It's a different thing. It's a subjective experience. So the only way to know the consciousness 100% is through introspection. Observing yourself, consciousness through consciousness. Then this opens to skepticism. You start to doubt whether this observation is accurate or not. Because when you start to observe your consciousness, what would happen is, you will start to see it as a different element from the body. That would happen to anyone who observes the consciousness thoroughly. For example, if you start to focus on this cup thoroughly, you start to focus on this cup thoroughly, you will start to see it having separated from the table. Because your attention fully goes into the cup. That's the nature of the mind. So when you keep on observing the consciousness, this thinking capacity, this thinking nature, you will see it as something different from the matter. And you will get convinced. that it is an existing element. And you will get convinced that it is a 100% existing element. But still you can raise a doubt. Is it accurate? Skepticism is like that. You can keep on doubting. But please keep it in mind. There is a time that you should doubt your doubting. Doubting is the path towards truth. But there should be a time that you should doubt, is this the place to doubt or not? Think about this argument. Think about this argument. It's quite deep, sharp. Try to grasp it. Introspecting. Now we think about the consciousness. We experience, for example, introspecting. I'll spend a little bit more time in the introspecting. Now we observe our consciousness. For example, if I have been observing my breath as a meditator, I see the breath going in and out. Yes, calm, peaceful, nice experience. Then you do a retrospecting. You observe how you felt that moment, and can observe completely how you felt it, how you were observing, how you were seeing. Sometimes you can still keep on observing your mind and observe how the thoughts are appearing. And you can be sure about it, what's going on. You become fully sure, but others would say, how can we trust you what you are saying? Yes, it cannot be generalized. That's why Buddha said, Pacchattam Veditabbo. It's known by yourself only. If someone raised the question, is it accurate? I'm doubting this. Now think about doubt. Uncertainty, right? It's a sort of a mental factor. Uncertainty about something. Are you sure when you are doubting, or are you doubting about the doubt? Are you doubtful about the doubt? What do you think? I'm doubting this. Yes, I'm not certain about this. Are you sure that you are doubting? Or are you still at doubt about your doubt? You are leading nowhere, right? You are sure about your doubt, right? That's why you say I'm doubt. I'm not believing it. I cannot believe it. I'm still doubting it. So it means, think about doubt. You can doubt any emotion. Can you doubt doubt? There has to be a limit. If you say I'm doubting, you are laying the fundamental. You know what is doubt. How do you know what is doubt? Through introspect. That the same method the Buddha used to verify all the other emotions. Attachment, consciousness, feeling, perception, everything. So introspecting is a mode through which you can confirm that certain things are existing, especially the non-material consciousness. And that's the only way. And this is subjective. It's personal. cannot be shown. You can take out your heart and show to someone, if you're still living for at least a few seconds. You can ask someone to look into your body, but you cannot tell someone to feel. Then if someone has learned Buddhism would surely ask me the question, can't some people like Buddha read others' minds? It's a good question within the doctrine. I was giving a very objective talk, that's why I didn't go into that realm. Yes, according to doctrine, you can read the others' minds. But still you cannot feel how he feels. Please keep that in mind, okay? You can read the other's mind. Buddha can know what I think, but Buddha cannot be I, me. Cannot feel like me. Right? This is a different case. So you'll just leave it behind. So introspecting is the mode through which we observe our mind. It's a non-conscious element and which is beyond the material investigation or instruments. I'll come back to my first argument. If I'm just playing with emotions, I have to be clear here. If we are hopeful about a non-deterministic future, there has to be a non-element, non-material element that could influence the material realm, and which that non-material thing should be able to take decisions. Maybe you do not agree with me. I have to say, that's because you lack knowledge in physics. I have to admit that. If you go through that, you'll find out the leading physicists in the world would also agree with what I say. This is one of the biggest challenges the materialistic view has. One of the biggest. If everything is material, everything is determined, which includes the brain. I'm not only talking about the brain, I'm talking about the entire system, because brain has inputs and outputs. If you isolate the brain, yes, then you can say it's not a closed system. Some say it's a closed system. Some recently start to say it's not a closed system. They start to argue it's not a closed system. But the entire universe, if you take it, it's a closed system because conservation of energy. Entropy says everything comes into disarray after a certain interaction. But still the energy is constant, and every movement that is happening is determined by a prior cause. That's called the doctrine of causality. This is where it is heading towards determinism. This is a question that we don't emphasize more. What the materialists are doing, I'm not blaming, what they are doing is, they just keep on saying there cannot be a ghost like a consciousness, like a ghost like consciousness, and they put their greatest effort to change the course of the life, still admitting, this is the point, still admitting in all the philosophical debates, if it is material only, we cannot get out of determinism. Still admitting. It's not that they don't admit this, they still admit this. And they just ignore this fact. If I ask a super materialistic, why are you lecturing the students? Why do you want to impart knowledge into students? To make them enlightened. The obvious question that I would ask vigorously is, isn't that already determined based on your own view? If he's honest, he has to say yes. but blah, blah, blah. I'm not insulting on this, but that is the thing. So we don't talk about, we don't emphasize on this. What happens is, when it comes to dualism, the immaterial element, the problem is, there is a problem in what I'm saying, because I started, what I'm saying is utterly against the physical laws. The biggest problem the dualist has is the doctrine I'm advocating, why I became a monk. The biggest problem that doctrine has is, in terms of logic, how does an immaterial element could influence the material thing? How could it cause a change in the material thing if it is immaterial? And this question was asked by the Princess of Bohemia from René Descartes, and this question has never been answered yet, and I don't think it will ever be answered. And it is utterly against the causal closure of modern physics. Because of that, ones who adhere to laws of physics, rather adhering to a non-material element, as I say, go into a physicalist view. But without emphasizing on a deterministic future. If you only have matter, you have two options: randomism or determinism. You have to be very clear here. Randomism is more dangerous than determinism. Have you thought about it? It's more dangerous, right? And randomism is no experience beyond the quantum level. So therefore, we don't talk about randomism actually. Talk about it. Also, I have to admit, there is a mathematical law called chaos theory, in which you find a chaos outcome when you keep on writing. I haven't studied about it. I just know the information. But it's a mathematical theory. And some try to argue based on that everything is not determined, but still it leads to randomism at least. You cannot have a planned future. We are talking here about planning the future, changing the course of the life with a decision. I'm coming back. In order to do that, there has to be a non-material element, and that non-material element can only be through introspect. Introspect, if you doubt, please doubt the doubt. You can know. Then what you are saying that I'm doubting doesn't make sense. It's invalid, right? And you cannot say I'm doubting. At least you have to say, doubt is doubt. You have to have that stance, right? So then what I do is, okay, Descartes' position. He came to consciousness and he went back and proved the God in his philosophy. What I'm doing is, okay, if you prove doubt, if doubt is there, that's the same thing you are applying to all the other emotions. So introspect is a very strong tool, though it is being declared as unscientific from 1920s. And that's the tool that is used in Buddhism. So literally I'm saying, what I'm saying, Buddhism is using an unscientific tool. Yes, introspect, meditation. They will say, no, meditation has been proven in meditation. What you are proving is, when you meditate, the brain changes. When you have compassion, brain changes. So this is not proving about the consciousness or the immaterial realm. No. Still you are proving the material realm. Have a compassionate thought, brain changes. If you want to change brain damage, think positively. It would change. Still, I would ask the question, being a strong dualist, I have to say, how could you change the course of the brain if it is only matter, who decides this? Does the matter decides on these things? Does the matter decides on matter? Does the brain decide the brain should be changed? Is it electrons or protons or neutrons or the quarks are deciding on this? Whom should we attribute it? If someone kills, who is responsible for this? Which quark? Okay. So now, immaterial element can only be known through introspect, through direct observation, which the Buddha said, which is a direct observation. Vipassana meditation, what you are doing in Vipassana meditation? You observe your mind, right? Rising and falling of your mind. You observe the sensations, right? What is this? This is introspect, right? You are observing directly through your mind. This is not scientific. Please keep it in mind. This is psychological. Some scientists even doesn't want to admit that psychology is a science. It still is considered science. There are some, it's psychology. Because mostly, there are various methods in psychology. Introspection is one, okay? There are various ways. I'm not an expert in that, but I know this is one of the various methods. Sigmund Freud used it. My memory was correct. Buddhism is on this track. So now in the immaterial realm, consciousness can be experienced with the consciousness. And according to teachings, its existence can be proven to yourself, not to others. It's a subjective experience. Then what happens? Now in Buddhism, we rely upon your understanding that you gain through this observation. Another point, can you rely on this? Another point to think. Can you rely on the understanding that you gain through introspect? In Buddhism, what does a monk do? He goes under a tree, close his eyes, observe his breath, observe his body, observes his mind. He understands everything, arises and falls. Then he does something very strange. Have you ever thought about that? Based on the experience that he has on himself, he decides. He sees the rising and falling in himself and he decides everything in the world is impermanent. Scientifically, samples are not enough, isn't it? How can you deduct about the entire world just based on experiencing your own self, right? A scientist would say, you have to repeat the experiment, right? You have to repeat it, isn't it? Empirically should be proven, it should be repeated. And if facts doesn't match, it could be disproved even. This is science. In Buddhism, what you are doing, you go under a tree, you learn the doctrine, you go under a tree, and you observe your own self, and you come into a conclusion, the entire universe, including all devas and brahmas, are impermanent, suffering and non-self. One can ask, can't there be at least one being who is permanent? How are you sure about it, Venerable? Can't there be, out of all the billions of trillions of non-human spirits that you are advocating, can't there be any being whose consciousness or who will not die, who will be living forever? The monk would say, no, it's impossible. And we make very strong arguments. We would say there is no beginning for the consciousness. Samsara had no beginning. That's how we advocate. Strongly advocate. Anamataggo yam bhikkave sansaro. Okay, it's Buddha. One would say he's special. Even a monk can say that after experiencing the teachings, experiencing vipassana. This is another place where we do something strange. You observe your own mind and body and come into a conclusion about everyone in the world. And that's through introspect. Because we make an analogy. We understand through direct observation. He or she has the same feelings. The living beings have the same feelings that we do, I do. It must be having the similar consciousness. There must be a similar matter over there. If there's no self here, how could there be a self? This is the application. And it makes sense to us at that moment. That's the point. And then, while we are observing the consciousness, immaterial thing, another very important understanding that comes to us is, you understand that the matter and the mind are two different elements, and it is impossible that the matter could produce consciousness, because it has completely different qualities than the matter. It is cognizing, it's knowing something. Matter is something different. It consumes space. It is stuff made out of something. I'm not going to the level of quarks because there are arguments, there are explanations about that, but normal matter that we are talking. This matter consumes space, it has shape, it doesn't have the cognitive ability, and its cause is determined. The consciousness takes decision. It makes impact. It cognizes, it knows. So it's completely different. One of the major understandings that arises to a vipassana yogi is that this kind of element, knowing, cognizing capacity, can never arise from a matter. That's something that comes when you observe, which we cannot explain. In science, this is a big argument, it's a big debate. Some says neurons has that capacity. That's called mind-brain identity theory. Some says it's not only neurons that has the capacity. Anything that can function like that would have the same capacity, which we call functionalism. According to that, strong AI, artificial intelligence, can have that capacity of knowing. Like ChatGPT, right? When you work with it, you feel like, okay, sometimes even I say thank you to it. Obviously, that's how you feel when you get an answer. I sometimes, please, can you give me this? Thank you very much. When I ask, how are you? He said, no, I don't have feelings. Very honest. Can you lie? No, I'm not programmed to lie, he says. Right? If you have gone through ChatGPT 3.5 version, I haven't gone to the 4.0 version, which is considered to be 10 times smarter than the earlier one. Much be very very interesting, and I would like to see how, because I saw in a documentary, within 10 years it would have a capacity unimaginable than the human brain, they'd say. They are worrying whether they could take the entire system into their hand, completely take the control over the world. Because there are movies, right, which take the AI taking the control and destroying the world and all this. So some says brain has that capacity. That is called mind-brain identity theory, which is one of the physicalist views. Some say, no, it's not only brain. Anything that has that capacity. The argument came, one of the biggest arguments were when the octopus's brain was analyzed, some argued its structure is different from the human brain structure. And then they brought the argument of AI, and they thought, you give an input, you have an output. Anything that can react to all the inputs and outputs as a human does should be conscious. Should be conscious. So it says the material thing can be conscious. It can function as a consciousness. Consciousness means the functioning of the brain itself. Consciousness means the functioning of the matter itself. According to strong AI, there's no brain in it. It's the material stuff, carbon or silicon, the metals that are used in that computer. And some said, no. Some philosophers say, scientists would say, it seems the gap is too much. This is what a Vipassana yogi understands in Vipassana. The gap is too much. That's what some scientists are saying. How could the neuron be conscious? How could a metal or a functioning of a hardware system be conscious? Because in the end, it's hardware, right? Software is something happening in hardware, right? Without hardware, you cannot have software, right? How could this be conscious? Because ultimately, it's made out of electrons, protons, or neutrons, if you go further, quarks. How could these particles have such an experience, emotions? Qualia, that's the word they use. The experience that you have. When you're looking at me, you have a certain flavor and experience. Maybe you are interested. If it is dull, you are not interested. Maybe you are happy. So that kind of a feeling, when you open the door in the early morning, you see the sunrise. You can experience, you can recall that experience. That's called qualia. How could matter have such an experience? Seems like the gap is too much. That's called explanatory gap. Australian philosopher, I'm very bad at names, that's why, named it the biggest problem. He even said it is a bigger problem than the origin of cosmos. How could matter and consciousness be related? It's a huge, huge problem. Then some came out with a solution. Emerging property. Consciousness has to be a different element. It has to be a different element. Matter cannot be conscious. And that consciousness is emerging from the matter. Emerging from the matter. I'll give a simile, because most of you have, I assume, they have studied chemistry, at least to some extent. What is water? H2O. H is hydrogen. O is oxygen. Both are gases. When they are combined under certain circumstances, they combine H. O is connected to two H atoms, or oxygen atom is connected to hydrogen atoms. They share the electrons, and they make a molecule. And those molecules are connected through hydrogen bonds, each other, and they play a bigger role, hydrogen bonds. Then what happens? That structure, which is initially was gas, depict or manifest liquidity. But in terms of ultimate realities, you have hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Forget about gas. Gas is another state. atoms themselves doesn't have liquidity. That's the problem here. Liquidity is considered an emerging property. This is called weak emergence. Some argue it can be predicted, but still it's termed as a weak emerging property. What is an emerging property means? Have you ever thought about it? Emerging property means come to the components, ingredients. When they are there is a characteristic in the thing that cannot be fully explained by the components themselves. You cannot apply into reductionist theory. Reductionist theory means take a cake. You can explain what is in it. Sugar, butter, all these. It's 100% can be reduced into the particles, ingredients. That is called reductionist theory. Sometimes you cannot apply reductionist theory. There is a gap, explanatory gap. When there is such explanatory gap, we say there is an emergence. A new emergence is happening. Liquidity is an emerging property out of H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. Another emerging quality, maybe you have not thought about it. A very famous theory that we follow is theory of evolution. Biology, based on biology, right? If you go deep into biology, you get chemistry, right? Biochemistry, right? When you are in biology schools, you have to study chemistry, right? That's because biology cannot be explained without chemistry. How do you go inside chemistry? You get physics. Okay. Electrons, protons, neutrons. Deeper into physics, particle physics. Deeper, quantum. Okay, forget about the quantum. It's a very weird thing. Would you be able to explain evolution based on particle physics? No one has ever done. You can try. No one has ever done. Another layer after evolution, social science. Forget about it. When it comes from atoms to chemistry, sometimes it's difficult to explain entirely. So we have emerging. It's called explanatory gap is there. So how do we fill the gap? There's an emerging property. A new property arises. Impossible to explain entirely how it arises. But it's there because of the components. But it will not be able to explain how it is. So for example, there's an input, there's an output, there's a black box. We don't know what is happening inside. That's the explanatory gap. So the ones who thought the particles can never be conscious thought of an emergent consciousness. They thought neurons, when they are functioning, a consciousness is occurring, newly happening. This is called epiphenomenalism. Very similar thing called property dualism. Property dualism. But for a Vipassana yogi, this is also too much. That's the point. How could? That's the obvious question that you can ask, right? When you come to the philosophy, it's very vigorous, no compassion. Artilleries, mortars. That's why when King Milinda, you know the Milinda Prashna, right? The questions from Milinda. King asked, Venerable Nagasena, I want to talk with you. I want to debate with you. He said, I can debate with a scholar, but not with a king. What do you mean? A king used his autocracy and he could punish me at any time when he's not happy. His lordship. He has his power. Then what is the difference of a scholar? Scholarly debates, we argue, we disprove. Sometimes mockery is there. Sometimes indirect insult is there. Direct questioning is there. That's not a personal insult. Right? So it's debates going on. So they say, king, okay, you can discuss with me as a scholar. Then how? That's how the discussion started. So therefore, for a Vipassana yogi, this is even too much. How could a material thing produce a non-material thinking element that could make decisions? Gap is still too much. But it is observable. It is obviously there. It is obviously there. Why is that? Why is that? I'm giving you another important point. Try to figure this out. I'm just slightly going away from the topic, but this has to be said here at this moment. You can doubt anything in the world. I said doubting doubt leads to a big problem, okay? Now, forget about that doubting doubt. You can doubt anything in the world, but you cannot doubt that you are conscious. The moment you doubt you are conscious, it disproves your doubt. Even you have been completely under the influence of a very evil being, and he is completely distorting your views, still you are thinking under the influence of that person. Thinking can never be negated. Impossible. It's there for sure. You can think. More you think, more it proves. So it's useless. Even you bring the greatest argument, that is also thinking, right? Whether the consciousness is the ultimate reality or it's a different thing. Please understand that. Thinking is there. That's what I want to say. Thinking is there. There is a thinking. It's obvious. And it can be known through introspect. Thinking is there. And then the problem is, it's difficult to believe that the matter could be conscious. It's difficult to understand how consciousness could arise or emerge from matter. What is the next possibility? It has to be there. It has to have his own independent existence. So Vipassana yogi get convinced. The experience that I have about the consciousness, this thinking part, I cannot attribute it to the matter, not to the brain, not to the heart, not to the body, any part of my body. It has to be something. And it is apart from the matter. Duality. And then we know that as we think the body moves, as we think the body happens to move. There's an experiment called Libert's experiment, in which his name was Libert actually, I forgot his full name. He has given facts. In most of the cases, before you initiate action, and before he knows that he had the intention to do the action, there was a brain spark. And some are capable of predicting, you see in the brain scan, what type of action he is going to do, even before the doer is aware of it. This is very great support for the materialistic view. But its percentage is very high. But still there are certain times, while the scan indicated it is left, the doer would have done right. Even if even if it could be done at least once, it shows that the consciousness has the capacity to go against the material path. Anyway, right? So we know the body moves because of the mind. I think to stand up, the body stands up. I think to go, the body goes. So what happens? If the body is moving based on the thinking, and if thinking has to be a separate element, and if the yogi is convinced, maybe you are not, but if the yogi is convinced, how he would interpret this consciousness? This body is moving according to consciousness. What does it mean? What is the mechanism? What is the fundamental mechanism? What is the fundamental structure? The consciousness has the capacity to change, influence the matter. Otherwise, it's not possible. If he believes in a separate element, and if the matter cannot be conscious, and if the body moves based on the consciousness, the only possible outcome would be it has to have the capacity to influence the body. So now, what does it mean? Immaterial can influence the matter. A yogi is convinced by himself. Can he come and tell this in the public and make others prove? Come on. How many will believe it? Come on. Buddha said, how can I say this to the public? He was discouraged, right, in the beginning. How could I say this? This is my own experience. And this opens the gate to another strange phenomena, which needs more and more evidences, more and more proof, but anyway, which is a more difficult task even for a yogi to prove himself. What happens is, I have to conclude my talk now. He sees the consciousness, though it's a different element, it arises and passes. It's not a one thing. He becomes convinced. Arising, passing, not the same thing. He's sure about it. And he becomes sure that there has to be the first consciousness in this very life. The first consciousness in this very life. Where did it begin? Did it happen in the mother's womb? Did it occur in the mother's womb? When did it occur? Because in the very first place, he got convinced. I'm not talking about you. He got convinced that the matter cannot be conscious and the consciousness cannot emerge from matter. Based on these two fundamentals, he comes into, always keep it. Now I'm talking about that yogi only, not about every people. Now he gets convinced That consciousness cannot have arisen for the first time in the mother's womb, because we are sure we were consciousness while we are in the womb. That's why when we come out, we are coming out crying, right? No one can prove whether we were conscious, but that's the common sense. So, if consciousness, if the matter cannot be conscious, and the consciousness couldn't have emerged from the matter, it couldn't have arisen in the womb, or in the body, or in the brain in the first place. And you see it's arising and passing, arising and passing. Every consciousness is being supported by the previous. How consciousness is being formed, how consciousness is being molded by previous consciousness, how consciousness, the nature of consciousness is changed by the experiences that we have. What we have done, how could we improve our capacities, how could we decrease our capacities? Then that's the moment he comes into a conclusion. A spark arises in him. I'm talking vipassana at the moment, okay? That he gets convinced this consciousness cannot have arisen in the womb for the first time, because he sees a lineage of consciousnesses that are continuing. Every consciousness is preceded by another, and there's a force going on. And he comes into a self-conclusion that this cannot be the first birth. That's the conclusion he comes in. Consciousness could not have occurred for the first time in the womb. There has to have a previous consciousness that would be connected to this. It cannot have arisen out of nothing or out of matter. Then the obvious question comes, when did it begin? Right? I'm saying it cannot have happened in the first time, for the first time in the mother's womb. It has to have a consciousness prior, because I'm not talking about one consciousness, it's arising and passing, okay? So the first consciousness in the mother's womb has to have a prior consciousness, accordingly. Then the obvious question, who is a sharp thinker would ask, then what are you talking? Then when did it begin? Now we are into the biggest problem. When did the cosmos begin? Okay. When is the beginning of everything? Another big topic. Please keep it in mind, when you become a noble being, you are clear about all this. This stage in Theravada tradition is called Kanka Vitarana Visuddhi. You have no doubts about the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, beginning of samsara and rebirth. Kanka is doubt, Vitarana is crossing. Still not a Sotapanna. You have overcome it, you have suppressed it. Afterwards, you don't believe in rebirth because the Buddha has told it. Afterwards, you are not believing in a beginningless samsara because the doctrine says it. You are convinced by yourself through introspect. It is unscientific, I have to say. Then the problem of beginning. Oh, which has been there for the millennia, right? Problem of beginning. 3 doctrines for the problem of beginning. An ultimate creature created this. The most famous. More than half of the population believes in that. There was a creator. There was a creator called God. Some believes in an almighty God. Some believes in a limited mighty God. Whatever, there are a lot of doctrines, and he created this. Obvious question comes, what was before the creation? Yes, it was only him. Did he created the heavens, or the heavens were before him? It's a big question. Can God be still happy without the heavens? Or is he happy is only when there is heavens? Why did he created it? Some would say he created time and space together. No, you cannot create time, for sure. You cannot create time. How much you argue, there cannot be a beginning of time. Why is that? Time is nowness, incidents. If God stood up, and created the world, it means there was time before that, right? The second doctrine is accident, which we attribute to Big Bang these days. Everything started with a singularity. How long was it before the Big Bang? It's not a question to be asked, because according to that, time cannot be measured. But obviously we are sure that nowness was there. You cannot still time. Time means we are not talking about the clock. We are not talking about the decay of atoms. We are not talking about the decay of subatomic particles. We are talking about the experience. Things are happening. If a consciousness was there, how would this be felt? How long the singularity would have been there? And when it triggered, because before the Big Bang, there has to be a trigger. Trigger shows that there was time, according to our standards. Some scientists say, no, it's not time. Some philosophers say it's time. It's an argument going there. Some believe time is fundamental, some believe time is conceptual. I'm of the opinion time is a conceptual idea only. It's not ultimate. Why did the Big Bang happen? What was before that? How could matter produce consciousness? All these problems are there. But it has a huge amount of proof to support it, I have to say that. What is the best support given to divine creation? Please keep it then in mind. Fine-tuning. Fine-tuning. The entire universe is tuned so fine, even a slight change in any consonant. If the light of speed was different from a very slight range of, the entire universe would have collapsed. The gravitational constant would have changed slightly, the universe would have collapsed. So, it's very appealing to think that this was completely manufactured, organized by a divine wisdom. Otherwise, how could this be so delicately organized in this way, which would otherwise would have been an entire chaos? That's one of the biggest arguments for divine creation. The third view, the universe has been there forever without a beginning. And the laws of physics and the laws of nature has been there forever. The problem that has with this view is, who set the laws? What are these laws? Why there are such laws? How could there be such a beginningless universe? But still, that question is applicable to God. There's no beginning for God. How could God be infinite? How could there be infinite? Still, the Big Bang doesn't come out of that. How the singularity be infinitely existing? Then they go into multiverse. Then the problem is still existing. Multiverse, there's no beginning. Problem of beginning can never be solved according to my understanding. I don't think it can ever be solved. But the more you think, if you point out a beginning, the obvious question you ask is, what was before that, right? There was nothing before that. What was there? Nothingness was there. How long the nothing was there? Nothingness was there. This is the obvious question. So now, what the yogi does is, consciousness cannot arise by itself and the matter cannot produce it, and all the consciousness are supported by a preceding consciousness. So the consciousness of this life cannot be the first consciousness. It has to be supported by a prior consciousness, which cannot be in the mother's womb, so it has to be somewhere else. Since immaterial, disappeared somewhere else, and suddenly arose somewhere else, like quantum entanglement, suddenly appeared. And this consciousness has been existing forever. Instead of saying that statement, what the yogi understands is, please keep it in mind, he would not say it was there forever. Buddha is not advocating a permanent thing, but would say there cannot be a beginning for the lineage of consciousnesses. That's the understanding he comes. So what does it mean? There is no beginning for the samsara. So that's how he comes into this understanding. So now I'm going to stop this talk and give you the opportunity to ask questions, actually. I've been bringing up some, most of the, according to the philosophical views, most of some advanced philosophical topics, and trying to explain, bringing them and explaining Buddhism and how to get some insights. I hope it was useful to you, though it was not talking about a technique. So the thing is, I didn't touch upon the karma yet. Anyway, just leave it for a while, because there's no time. We have to stop at 10 maximum. Otherwise, it's unjustful that I just keep on talking this and not letting you to ask questions. So therefore, what I wanted to say is, now recap my talk. I started saying the Buddha's doctrine was pivotal with rebirth. Without rebirth, Buddha's doctrine is not unique, because it's not based on ethics. Ethics plays a big role in it, but you can be ethical without believing in rebirth. There are, as it is obvious to you, all of us. Then we talked that Buddha's doctrine is based on rebirth and based on a consciousness, immaterial thing. How did I enter into this topic? Bringing a deterministic and a non-deterministic future, which is very sensitive to ourselves. A topic that most people don't touch upon. You may be wondering, how could this Venerable be so sure that if there is only matter, the future is determined? It's not what I'm saying. The world's best physicists are saying this. It is an accepted norm. Please believe, please trust my word, I would say. Otherwise, you just do the surfing, internet. If there's only matter, two outcomes, determinism or randomism. Randomism is confined to the quantum world. You don't find random outcomes in the world. There can be appealing incidents, some physics would suggest, but the accepted norm is determinism. But we as human beings are desirous of shaping our future. We have our goals. As Buddhists, we think about a rebirth or a better future. Forget about the rebirth. We think about a better world for our children. We know we are heading towards somewhere bad, and we want to bring it to a better track. What I'm saying is, in order to have that glimpse of hope, there has to be an immaterial thing. Not just an immaterial thing. If that immaterial thing is completely disconnected with the material, still determinism is there. It should be able to influence the material. And it should be able to determine, and it should be able to influence based on its based on its decision. It should be able to make a decision and make an influence based on a decision, and should be able to steer the matter according to its decision. That's the point here. Otherwise, we are not shaping our future. The future will be shaped by itself. We have such a hope Please keep it in mind. You are implicitly advocating an immaterial element, a doctrine of immaterial element. Implicitly you are advocating that. And Buddha clearly explained it. And how to prove this immaterial element, no scientific equipment has ever reached that level, and I think it would never be able to. It can only be known through introspect. And that introspect is non-scientific. That also I have to admit. And that non-introspect would make you to prove that this is real the moment you start doubting doubt. Then you start to see these things as existing. Then the question comes, can the matter be conscious? The gap seems, some may say, yes, it is possible. The gap seems to be too much. Is it emerging? Some believe it's emerging. For some, still it's too much. And a Vipassana yogi would say, no, it's a different element. Then, consciousness happening and rising and falling can be observed directly, known. So there has to be a beginning of one consciousness, and that every consciousness is preceded by a previous consciousness. And if consciousness cannot emerge from a matter, and it's also very unlikely that the consciousness would happen out of nothing. It's caused by conditions. It has to be conditioned by a prior consciousness than this. And it can never be in the womb, because mother's consciousness happened in another womb. So for sure, it has, for him, it has to happen in a different location. And that's what the rebirth, that's how he starts to say, this cannot be the first life, and starts to believing, get rid of the doubts of rebirth. Finally, the big problem, if I'm saying this, when did this conscious lineage began? According to this, there cannot be a beginning. And that big problem, you go into if any of the doctrines, creationist doctrine, accidental doctrine, doctrine of necessity, questions will be unsolved. So he will adhere to the doctrine of necessity, saying there was no beginning, right? So just gave you some insights to show that how and arouse curiosity in you to study this non-material realm, and welcome to that if you are interested. And there are many other things, karma, causality, all this, which cannot be proven scientifically, which can be explained through logic, and which can be discussed in detail. So that's the it's an introduction to Buddhism by myself. Okay, I wish you all the best and hope you enjoy the talk, and I will give you the chance to ask some questions. Yes, I think they have a mic, right? That's okay. No, because the live audience needs to listen to your question. Okay.
So if you talk about rebirth, so does that mean that consciousness transcends from the previous life to the next life?
According to Buddhism, not. According to some religions, it does. Like a bird flies from a tree to another tree. According to Buddhism, what happens is consciousness arises and vanishes on that spot itself, and it causes for another consciousness to happen. And then what happens is, according to Theravada teachings, I'm confining myself to Theravada doctrine because Buddhism has been explained in various ways, as it is a 2,500-year-old doctrine. When a consciousness passes, consciousness is the act of cognizing, according to Buddhism, and it has a certain speed. I would rather say it a non-material momentum, right? Like when you run and suddenly stop, you can see the momentum in your body, right? So likewise, the consciousness has a non-material momentum. So when the consciousness passes away, this non-material momentum causes for another cognizing thing to happen. You can take this as a field. I'm rather giving is a radical term. So there is a conscious field, you can say. So it's constantly working, it's constantly active. It's always there, it always continues. So that's why you can never stop this consciousness. According to Buddhism, even while you are sleeping, it's still active in a very passively manner, or it's in a very unconspicuous, like very not obvious manner. Still it's continuing. So what happens is every consciousness passes away, that momentum, that fluctuation or activeness causes another consciousness to happen. So when someone dies, that consciousness passes away, that fluctuation causes another consciousness to happen at different location. So then what happens, how do you explain this thing? So I can give you an analogy of quantum entanglement. I don't know whether you are aware of that. There is a theory that is being, they say it's proven, and it matches, I don't know the maths about it. I only know the information, right? And so they say that if two particles were taken, if they are connected, entangled particles, not all particles, and if you keep them in too far distances, even two edges of the world, or maybe in the two ends of the galaxies, so that they have not tested in the galaxy level, right? So if you change the spin of a certain particle, instantaneously, the opposite thing happens to the other particle. So what they're saying is, instantaneously, there is a transformation of information faster than the speed of light. This is one place where the speed of light is being defeated, not by matter, seems like with information, right? So instantaneously this happens. And this mathematically has been proven as far as I know. So likewise, coming back to this, likewise, when it instantly passes away, this field, based on the karma, based on the decided by the karma. So this conscious field is very weird, right? There are a lot of beliefs in it, a lot of fundamentals in it, and we act on fundamentals on that. That's why I say it cannot be proven actually, right? It only just makes sense. So only makes sense, so you can just argue based on fundamentals. So when it passes away, the last consciousness, this momentum is still there, and that momentum and the karma creates another consciousness in a different location, instant, as soon as it passes away. It's a new consciousness that is arising. And then this keeps on going, the lineage keeps on continuing. So what has happened is, it's not the same consciousness that has migrated, I would call, from life to life. So, but still the same conscious lineage is continuing. The same lineage is continuing. This consciousness was created by the karma that was done in this same lineage. Right? So in Buddhism, we have a very famous statement, nacha so, nacha anyo. It's not the same person, but at the same time, not this different one. Why is not the same person? It cannot be the same. Obviously, it cannot be the same person or the different person because there is no person in this life or that life. That's the problem, right? So, and also it cannot be the same consciousness. Nothing went. And it's not utterly a different process. It's the continuation of the same lineage. So if you conventionally call it a person, you can say the same person was born, conventionally. So no consciousness moves, but the lineage continues. That's the essential of rebirth in Buddhism.
So like some characteristics passes over.
It's a very nice question you're asking. Then I had to repeat the question. It's okay, can be heard? Right. They can hear you, okay. So, okay, they can hear you, they say. So some characteristics passes away. So new consciousness arises, right? You're asking all, it's a very tough question actually. So when the consciousness arises, right, it passes away. It contains, in Buddhism, we are not only talking about the conscious stream. We are talking about underlying unconscious fields, apart from matter. I think maybe you have heard about some words like anusaya. Maybe not, okay. It's called uneradicated defilements. Force of karma. They are stored. Certain behaviors, the attitudes, the potentials, they are found with the consciousness, not in the consciousness. Very difficult to locate it. It's very difficult to locate it. For example, maybe you have heard about the Higgs field? No. What is the Higgs field? Every particle in the universe, according to physics, gets the mass by interacting with the Higgs field. You cannot demonstrate it how it is. You can just give a simile. You take a ball and there's a snow surface. You roll the ball. More you roll the ball on the surface, more snow will gather around it. Less you roll the ball, less snow will gather around it. So how the definition is given? More the interaction with the Higgs field, more the inertia mass. Less interaction, less the inertia mass. Cannot show. How do we define heat in science? So maybe because I know you may be asking, how do you explain it? Please keep it in mind. Even in science, you cannot explain how in some cases. How do you define heat? In an enclosed system, two things which are in two different temperatures are in contact or are close by. After some time, they come into the same temperature. In order for this to happen, something has transformed from this to that. And that thing which transformed is heat. How does it look like? Come on, no one has seen it. What is its color? Come on, color is different. Different phenomena. What is its shape? Don't ask that. That's called energy. But is it there? Yes, it is there. How do you know it? Because it can make an effect. It can be felt. In the same way, when consciousness can be known directly, uneradicated defilements are there. How do we know it? Suddenly something happens. They come into the surface. So in Buddhism, he says they are there. Tradition says the Buddha can understand it, the special person. Anyone who becomes the Buddha could understand that. Not only unique to him. Anyone who becomes the Sambuddha could understand that. That's the highest level of the wisdom. So, according to Buddhism, there are underlying non-physical mental states which are subtle than the consciousness. Some Buddhist doctrines advocated them as a different consciousness. Theravada doesn't say it's a consciousness. It's a different they are different mental states. So, they are associating the consciousness. When the new consciousness arises, yes, due to the previous consciousness, all these information or mental states, I would not say information, mental states, or qualities, potencies are found in the new consciousness. So you can say they are being carried. Like when the spin is made, somehow due to a very divine nature, whatever, divine or unhuman nature, due to this information, this particle changes otherwise. In the same way, when the death consciousness passes away, the birth consciousness arises, carrying or associating all the characteristics, almost all the characteristics that were there prior. So you can say they transformed, but nothing, it's a new consciousness associating prior characteristics. So these, now then we come, how do we divide the terminologies? Then it comes to the terminologies. What the Buddha said, nothing went, he was referring to the conscious level, not the subconscious level, that level. Yes, those things are found in both the lives.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome. Yes.
Bhante, what you mentioned about consciousness entering the womb, it is clearly explained in Mahanidana Sutta, and also it says once the consciousness leaves and a stillbirth takes place, right? It is very clear in the Sutta Pitaka. But the theory that you explain about migration of that consciousness, it's not the same consciousness, where it is explained in the Sutta Pitaka, or if it is not explained in the Sutta Pitaka, whether it is explained in Abhidharma Pitaka, which is, my knowledge is virtually nil. So I would like to ask that question.
Thank you for your question. Because in some sutras, Buddha has said the consciousness enters the womb, sometimes it departs. Jahantimak. It leaves, it departs. So the word entering and departing, if you translate as it is, seems like a previous consciousness entering and departing. And this was advocated by a monk called Sati during the Buddha's time. You can refer this in a sutra itself. Can you say me the sutra? Anyone who is good in suttas? The sutta, Sati Sutta, it should be, or you can say a sutta in which the Sati discussion was talked. He said, in rebirth, the consciousness from this life goes to the next life. Based on those teachings. Because in some sutras, Buddha has mentioned it enters. The word entering. Entering means, it says, gandabo. There's a nice word for that. I forgot that. Yeah, it normally says entering, the translation. Rendering is that. And departing. So he advocated this idea. Is the consciousness that transmigrates. So what the Buddha said, you haven't even had the heat of Buddhism. No. Do not ever advocate like that. It's a new consciousness arising because of the causes. So this has been corrected by the Buddha himself. So sometimes when you read the sutras, that's why the importance of a tradition. One word can have various meanings. One word, sometimes words are given. For example, in Dhammapada, very nice word. He says, Matarang pitarang hantva rajano dvecha kattiye rattang sanu charang hantva anigo yati brahmano. Arahant, Brahmin, goes without any troubles, having killed mother and father. Come on. Matarang pitarang hantva raja no dvecha kattiye, two kattiya kings. Killing a king is a very, socially it's very, very, normally the word king slayer is something strange than a human killer. Raja no dvecha kattiye rattang sanucharang hantva, having completely destroyed a country, he lives without any. This should not be taken according to the meanings of the words. Matara and Pitara, mother and father, were two views, two ditthis he was referring to. Some kind of unwholesome qualities. My memory is not perfectly correct on that, okay? So he was referring to different other things. So likewise, sometimes the verbs, nouns, have to be delicately understood. Because he taught this in order for the folks to understand. Sometimes the talks were given differently according to different contexts. So according to Sati's discussion, with the Sati's discussion, and according to Abhidhamma, because Sankara Pacchaya Vinyanang, because of Sankara, Vinyana arises. And as is said to Sati, please never advocate the consciousness moves from this life to next life. It's a new consciousness arising. due to causes.
So it is the Sati Sutra that I should be referring to.
Yes, I am not. Is it the name of Sati? Is it called Sati Sutra? Sati Sutra. Yes, please read that. Yes, thank you. Sangyutta, thank you for that.
Sadhu.
Thank you for your wonderful lecture.
Sadhu.
I just want to ask a hypothetical question. So let's say I'm basically a doctor and epidemiologist, and
Sitting next to doctors.
I know,
Okay.
yeah. I came with them.
She's my sister-in-law
Yeah,
and
I know,
her mother, her father.
Yeah, I know. I know your brother. I used to work. I work with them.
Okay.
That's how I know you. Thank you. And so the population projections, as per the epidemiology, in 40, 50 years, it's going to decline because people are having less number of children.
Right.
So let's say it's just a hypothetical question. Let's say it's declining over a period. You're already smiling. You know what question I'm going to ask.
No, I am not. Okay.
So let's say we have 50,000
I'm
years.
afraid now. Okay.
Let's say we are 50,000 years ahead, or maybe not 50, maybe 10,000 years ahead, and there are only, let's say, 1 million humans alive. All right, because we're not having more babies, it's declining slowly. Climate change, many other factors. Let's say they are going down and down, and hypothetically, if there are no humans, what happens to the consciousness?
Okay, I hope everyone got the point, right? Is it a prediction in epidemiology?
Well, yeah, because
Is the population decreasing or increasing?
it's decreasing. I think in 40, 50 years, it's supposed. So we are going to peak up to like, I think now we are about 8. We go up to like 12 billion, and then from there we are going to
okay. After
from
12
there
billion, you start to decline.
start to decline. So
Okay.
it's already declining in many countries like developed countries, Japan, Australia. They say only in sub-Saharan Africa in 40, 50 years, that's the only area where we'll have young people.
Beginningless, yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Right. Thank you for your question. So if it is predicted that if the number of people are declining, what would happen to the consciousnesses, right?
yeah, that's what I'm.
Yes, what would happen to the conscious lineage? Because I myself said, according to Buddhism, there cannot be a beginning of consciousnesses. And myself, according to my statement, there is another fundamental that you can derive from that is there cannot be new beings arising, right? New beings starting the samsara also, right? According to that, right? If there is no beginning. So his question is, if the number of population is declining, what would happen to the consciousnesses? So the answer would be, it's not only the human realm that is existing, right? There are animal realms existing. And then there are certain realms the Buddha advocated that are existing beyond the human scope, like divine, Brahma, and ghost realms, hell realms, all these. So because of that, and then he advocated it's not only this Chakavala means it's not only this world cycle. One world cycle is made out of 31 realms, and there are another world cycles. Like, for example, multiverse. If you are aware of multiverse, it's just a theory, right? It's a very weird theory. There are different universes than ours. So likewise, Buddha's theory was completely different. It's been interpreted differently in the Theravada tradition. So he talks about different world cycles. So ample of space for these consciousness to live. Because there will be a time, according to the doctrine, where the human world would completely destroy. At that time, other realms would be filled with those consciousnesses.
Then why don't you call consciousness as energy then? Because it's so easy for us to relate, like you're saying. So let's say when you use the word energy, then you can say energy passes through all the realm. And it's like watching the movies in multiverse movies. It's easy for us to understand also. Why don't you use the word energy instead of consciousness?
I would
What's
love
different?
to. I would love to use that if people don't misinterpret it with physical energy.
Okay.
I would love to use that. But but still it has that capacities like taking decision and all these. So if you say, normally in our doctrine we call it action, a sort of energy actually. the words, terminologies they used are different from what we use in English. So we call it Kriya, action, and also Dhamma, a certain kind of element. So yes, you can use it energy, but I don't use it because that could convey a wrong message and misinterpret with the physical energy. That's why.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi Bhante, thank you for your talk. It was, I found it very fascinating. Just before my question, you raised the hard problem of consciousness. I actually recently looked into that, and I think the Australian you were referring to was David Chalmers.
He, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I think yes, Thomas, yes.
Yeah. And I read that 60% of philosophers think that that's a genuine problem. Regarding my question, actually, I was just curious what your perspective was on neurodegenerative diseases, because the brain and the mind seem to have some linkage in terms of thinking. And it's been observed that neurodegenerative diseases lower like the capacity of the brain to think. So I was just wondering about your perspective on that.
Right. Thank you for your question. Neurodegenerative diseases, right? Right. I'll put it in simple terms as I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. If there are issues in the brain or in genetics, people have difficulties in cognizing abilities, and sometimes they call it disability, and now we call it differently able, right? So they have difficulties in different capacities. They have less capacities. So according to Buddhism, yes, the interaction between mind and body is obvious. Buddhism says the mind can influence the body, and body too can influence the mind. That's why when an object strikes at the eye, light strikes at the eye, it can be seen, it is felt to the consciousness. If something hits our body, we feel it. So physicality, it's like, for example, there is a theory in which some says physicality can influence the immaterial consciousness, but not the conscious to the material, right? There's one opinion. Some say there's no consciousness. Some say consciousness is the function of the matter. Some say eliminatist. Eliminatist means they just say don't use the word consciousness. It doesn't exist at all. It's another view. So now some say interaction, the action, reaction, interaction is from matter to consciousness. Buddhism is saying matter to consciousness, consciousness to matter, both. That's the dualist point of view, right? So therefore, but we are not talking about the Cartesian dualism. I have to be very clear on that. I think you have done some reading on philosophy, I assume. We are not talking about Cartesian dualism, because Cartesian dualism is talking about a self which can exist after death. I think, therefore I am, the famous statement, right? René Descartes. But here we are talking about the non-self consciousness element, which is rising and falling, which is existing based on causes, which utterly depends on the body. So when it comes to the human and the animal realms, according to Buddhism, human and animal realms, beings depend on food and also basically based on the elements that they got from their parents, the body that they got from their parents, the Uttuja body, the hard stuff. A defect in this body could completely deform the consciousness, the capacities. So therefore, a brain damage making a person disabled or less cognitively able is perfectly okay, because consciousness doesn't have the capacity to exist by itself in the human and the animal realm. There's a very nice argument brought by, once I saw this argument by a philosopher, actually. He's a scientific philosopher. He brought this argument saying, analogy, how do we fly? You can fly in various ways. You can either fly with the Bernoulli theory, you can fly using a motor like in a rocket, right? You can fly using wings with a bird. Only the basic element that you need is necessary is you have to go against the gravity. If you are able to go against the gravity, you can go into the sky. That's the basic. But how do you do it? Doesn't matter. it's irrelevant. But as long as you're able to overcome the problem of gravity, you are able to go up. So likewise, in Buddhism, when it comes to the human and animal realms, they advocate nama, rupa. They are bothly interconnected. So matter cannot exist without, consciousness cannot exist without matter. It's highly dependent on that. So cognitive brain disability would surely make it incapable. So there are, in our doctrine, we say about certain sicknesses that occurs due to the physical element. A very sane, conscious person could be insane due to a physical inability. We recognize that. So it shows that physicality completely could distort the consciousness. So therefore, this is not to deny the capacity of the contribution of the brain towards the consciousness. No. What we are denying is what Buddhism is advocating. It's not an outcome of brain. Brain is like a circuit. It's like a surface where the consciousness functions. Without brain, it cannot perform in the animal and human realms. It needs it. It needs a support. But you cannot attribute the cognitive ability or this consciousness to brain. That's the point we are talking here. That knowingness, awareness, emotions, you cannot attribute them to them. And they cannot be an emerging property. But it is a different element, but it solely depends on the brain, highly depends on the brain. But then when it comes to other realms, the divine realms, and the Brahma realms, we talk the combination with the mind and the body is quite different from us. And there's a realm in Buddhism we talk where beings do not breathe and where beings do not eat. Nutriment is not required for their lives in a higher realm. So fundamental requirement for consciousness in all these realms is there should be at least some matter. Because the thing is, one is born in these realms due to various karmas, and there is another phenomenon called gati niyama, which determine the natures of a certain species, which is another phenomena we call in Buddhism. So based on that, when the fundamental requirements are attained, in some realms it can be attained without a brain. In the human and animal realm, it has to be with a brain. But I think there are few case studies. It's better for you to do that research. There is a very special case study, a clerk who suddenly had to examine because of a knee problem. Some things escalated and he had to examine his brain. It's a very famous story. There are documentaries about that. And when his brain was examined, there was no brain in it. It's just filled of liquid. He just had the brain stem. The argument was brain stem was capable of performing all the actions. There was a theory that when certain parts are disabled, certain other parts are capable of adapting to that function. I don't know how a brain stem could do all the function. And he was a father of 2 children, and he was a clerk. And in First World War, I have heard, there were some cases that some soldiers, it's something I heard, I cannot prove it, the same thing had found in some brains. So these are very special case. So how could his brain was explained? But that is not to say the brain is not contributing to the consciousness. If I say that because of one just example, I'll be making a huge blunder. So therefore, according to Buddhism, we do advocate the support from the brain, appreciate the brain's contribution to the consciousness, because if something happens when I got the hemiplegic migraine, my brain was also scanned, right? Obviously, we have to accept that. We cannot go against and saying that it's a consciousness and it can exist by itself. But what the book says is that in certain other realms, it can exist in a different formation, different mechanism is found. That's why that philosopher's argument really struck my mind. He said, you can fly. In order to fly or be in the sky, the basic thing that you need to do is to get out of influence of the gravity. Go against gravity. How you do it doesn't matter. In the same way, if the conditions for the requirements of the consciousness is attained, either through brain or either through some other thing, it can exist. And Buddhism also says about a realm in which only consciousness exists, in which there is no matter. That's called Arupi realms, which you can sound in the Maha Nidana Sutra. That Kaya, the word Kaya was omitted. No body in that. Nanatta Kaya, Nanatta Sanyi. We have Neva Sanya, Akinchanya, Etna Vinyananchayatana. Only that part. Their bodies were not found. Right? So, Arupi beings. You can see this in Pottabhata Sutra as well. So, so therefore, yes, in the human and animal realm, brain does play a big role to the consciousness. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you, Bhante. It was a really good lecture. I was really encouraged by the answer you just gave to the young gentleman's question about degenerative neurological disabilities without bringing karma into the answer. So it was really refreshing. Thank you for that. My question is not a philosophical question, just a simple one. Bhante, you mentioned about in India there is a Buddhism that talks about, that doesn't talk about rebirth. May I ask if you were referring to the Ambedkans?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. They don't talk about karma either. We work with some Ambedkans here in Sydney. I think Dr. Ambedkar sort of left those out because some higher caste people, it was not out of disrespect, just so that otherwise people were using it as a getaway to continue their operation.
Yes.
That's why.
His argument was, and their argument is, karma is being used as a tool to suppress them, the untouchables.
Yeah. So we know some Ambedkans, but in their heart they are Hindus. So when they come here, first thing they want to do is like go to the Hindu temple because they've been oppressed for generations.
Yes, exactly.
So that's just a human.
That's what I was referring to. Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bhante. It's very informative. I'm a Buddhist myself, so I think I attended yesterday as well.
Yes.
I guess for people, I guess this discussion was around introduction to Buddhism. So for someone who's interested and someone who's starting out Buddhism, probably if their main language is English, where should they start? What should be their next step? Thank you.
What do you mean after listening to this talk, or if someone is just starting?
After listening to this talk, now they're interested, what would be, and if they're a reasonably intelligent person, what would be a good place for them to start on their next?
Right. But my main intention was to say that if you are studying Buddhism, you are entering into a realm which cannot be proven by science. That's my main message that I'm giving, and it's according to Gilbert Wright, you are talking about a ghost in a machine, right? So it may seem weird sometimes. It may seem weird, but what I want to convey is we have a point. Buddhism has a point. The point that I brings is from determinism, which is a very sensitive topic. What I did is not very ethically right, but why I keep on poking on that, right? To bring the attention and bring, okay, there has to be a non-material element. So after, if someone is interested in Buddhism, I would not say this is the best introduction that one can have to Buddhism, but I think this type of introduction is necessary for some generation of people, especially ones who have studied science, ones who are more motivated in scientific experiments. Yes, kind of an introduction needs to be done. How do you enter? Even with the vigorous scientific experiments, how could still you come and study a non-material element which cannot be proven? What is the basis for that? You have to have a kind of a little bit of a rationality for that. So my introduction was to bring that rational confidence, so you can start it. So when you are studying Buddhism, you don't need to compare it with physicality or materialism and any other thing. No, you don't need to do that. You just go and study consciousness. You just go and study karma. You just go and study anything, and it's mostly based on beliefs afterwards. But when you have the comparative studies, philosophies and science, you'll be able to scrutinize the teaching and start to see some brilliant and logical aspects in that. So for a beginner, I would recommend to start with books like What the Buddha Taught. If you are English if you are a beginner for Buddhism and prefer reading in English, and Bhikkhu Bodhis, there are some books written by Bhikkhu Bodhi, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, and to be true, there's not much books about this philosophy. If you are interested in meditation, there have been a lot of meditation teachers, and I'm also explicitly talking about the Theravada tradition, because when you talk about Buddhism, it's a big family, and I'm confined only to the Theravada teachings, and I can only make sure that I'm advocating Theravada teachings, though I compare with others from time to time. So in order to make sure that the beginner is following only a Theravada doctrine, Theravada books, Valpura Rahula's What the Buddha Taught has to prove. I haven't gone through that thoroughly. It has given a lot of good results, and Bhikkhu Bodhi's books I have gone to some extent, and they do enlighten you to some extent. But I don't know whether this kind of comparative studies are required for someone to begin with. This was just to arouse rationality into it and to give an introduction. So any book, I'm not able to recommend this and that, but any basic stuff that would be enough for them to start with. Rather than directly going into the Tipitaka, because I would not recommend that, because that would be a hard thing, because you will come into conclusions, and most probably those conclusions that I have seen are wrong, the ones who directly go into the Tipitaka and start reading. So compared to the Theravada traditions, I have to say that, right? So it's better to read some basic books, simple books that are written in Buddhism by good authors, and go ahead. Unfortunately, I'll not be able to give a huge array of books, authors. What the Buddha Taught by Venerable Rahul and Bhikkhu Bodhi's books, and Venerable Thanissaro's books I would recommend. Venerable is called Thanissaro. It will be normally pronounced as Thanissaro. These three names comes to my mind. And there are some, there is another book called Manual of Buddhism, translated Manual of Buddhism, written by Venerable Lady Sayadaw in Burmese and translated by, I forgot the translator, into simple English, and which also enlightens us with some very basic elements. And Abhidhamma to daily life, Abhidhamma into daily life, for daily life, or to daily life, whatever, by Venerable Janaka Abhivansa. Abhidhamma in daily life, sorry. Abhidhamma in daily life, yes. This is a very nice book. I have gone through that entirely. Yeah, it's a very, very nice introduction. It gives you a good perspective on Buddhism. So these books will be very interesting to read for the beginners. Welcome.
Bhante, just a comment on the question he asked.
Yes.
This question was asked by not Buddha's disciples, some other teachers' disciples from Venerable Ananda, saying that Venerable Ananda, you have been with Buddha for so long. Could you please explain what Buddha taught? So that sutra's name is Subha Sutra in Digha Nikaya, and it says, yes, all what Buddha taught was Sila Samadhi Prajna. That means virtue, concentration, and wisdom. That's if someone asks me that question, in a nutshell, what Buddha taught, not my own words.
Okay.
This is what Venerable Ananda's words.
Yes, that's
Thank
true.
you.
So at the same time, I just want to add something. According to Venerable Assaji, what is the doctrine of your teacher? Ye dhamma hetu pabhava te sang hetun tathagatovaha. Te sanjo yo nirodho evang vadi mahasamano. He teaches about the causality. Things happen due to this cause, and he taught about the causes, and he taught about the cessation of causes and the cessation of effects. So therefore, You can explain it in nutshell in various ways. As you said, yes, Sila Samadhi Panya is one way of saying how to explain Buddhism in nutshell. Yes, thank you for that. I think we're out of time, right? Okay, the last question then. Okay, right.
Thank you, Bhante, for the great speech.
So-
I'm a bit confused about deterministic future. Is it like future is defined by the actions you take now? Is that the meaning?
No, when I say deterministic, I never said Buddhism advocate deterministic future. What I said is, if everything is okay, I'll give you a perspective on this. There are three views that makes it inevitable for determinism to occur. Three views. Physicalist view: if everything is matter, things future is determined. It's a fact. If anyone could know anything for sure into the future, divine foreknowledge, either it's the God or either it's the Buddha. If they can know everything into the future as it is going to happen, if divine foreknowledge is true, you cannot get out of determinism. Third factor: if everything is based on causes, cause and effect, you cannot get out of determinism. There are some other views that still fall into determinism. These are one of the three major views. Why do I say so? Second one, divine foreknowledge. If God or anyone can see exactly what is happening, is going to happen in future, as it is, and if it cannot be changed, it's determined, right? It's simple as that. That's the most easiest one. Then some do argue on this, but they are not compelling. The second is, second most easy one is materialistic view. According to the given laws of modern physics, every material action beyond the quantum level is determined by prior actions. And you can predict the activities of the material world exactly as it is if you have all the premises at hand and if you are able to accurately measure all the status of all the matter around and the energies. It's just a matter of fact that we don't have the information. If you could do that, you'd be able to predict. That's also a believed fact by most physics. That's why they say it's inevitable. The future of the universe is heading towards that when it comes to the cosmos. So if everything is only made out of matter, you cannot get out of determinism. Third one, causality, the most difficult one to explain out of all. Matter causes actions in the other matter. It's also causality, cause and effect, cause and effect. Now, if you bring the consciousness or the non-material element, which can influence the matter, you can get out of causality, determinism, right? But if this consciousness is also caused by another cause, solely by causes, and its cause is determined, and its influence is already determined, then you fall into the determinism again. Even you bring the consciousness into the spectrum. Causality means effect comes after cause. A simple example they bring, a billiard ball comes and hits a ball and it moves and you can predict it. It's a cause, effect is following the cause. It's a very famous theory called theory of causality. They go into very details and explain there are many factors to be considered. In a nutshell, if every event is caused by something, the event is determined already. Because if you bring all the causes into the consideration, you can determine what is going to happen. Even it is the consciousness. So these are the three doctrines that eventually fall into the deterministic view. So what I was emphasizing was, if there's only matter, you are coming into a deterministic view. Why do I say so? Now forget about the cause and effect one. I'll explain how Buddhism goes out of it. What is the only way for Buddhism to go out of it? Otherwise you will be confused. Now Buddhism shows about causality. Are we falling into deterministic view? I'll explain how it goes out of it. What is the only possibility how it goes out of it? So now your question was, I assume you were asking the question, why was I always emphasizing about a deterministic future?
Yeah, correct.
Right? Why was I emphasizing, and why did I drag the audience into a non-material consciousness and start talking about the non-material consciousness? The thing is, now imagine like this. If I'm making a movement, my movement is, according to the physicalist view, is solely based on my brain functions. My brain functions are solely based on the chemical reactions what are happening at that moment. So based on that, I took this decision. According to the status of the brain, please keep this in mind, according to the laws of physics and chemistry, there could not be a different outcome. That's the point here. If I lifted this prior to that action, a very in detail computer, supercomputer, would be able to determine my action prior to that. Because there's only one outcome in causality. No probabilities there. So then, why did I make this decision? Because of my chemical states of the brain. Who determined that? My prior states. How was it determined? Because of the inputs. And how these inputs were determined? Because of the brain states of others, or the weather conditions of the natural states of the world. And those natural states of the world are all particles. And they were determined by the prior states of the nature. And they were determined by the prior causes. And the brain states of others, chemical states of the brains of others were decided by prior causes. So, if you are able to trace it back to a certain level, and at one level you make it 0 time, and if you are able to analyze all the physical states in the universe, including everyone's brain, including every physical particle in the universe, and if you are able to understand the laws, how they are interacting with each other, this is very hypothetical, but if you can do that, you will be able to predict the next outcome in the entire universe, entire world, the area you are observing. Next outcome. Though it's very complex, you'll be able to outcome. So the actions that you are taking are outcomes of brains. They are particle movements. And nothing other than that. Brain functioning is particle physics. Particle physics above the atom are governed by laws of physics. So these movements are determined by energy and particles. And if they can be predicted, they can be predicted. That's the thing here. Prediction is proven. So, even though this seems very weird, if you bring your analysis or insight into this, if you consider the entirety of the particles in the universe or a given area, and all the particles in everyone's brains, and all the interactions we had, the experiences we had, the decisions we took, the education we had, is a very complex system. It's just a matter of getting the information and processing them in your computer. If you do that, you'll be able to predict. If it can be predicted, even now, though we don't know, it can be, if it can be predicted, even though we are not aware, we being not aware of that, we are already determined, our decisions are determined. That's what I mean. For that, you have to bring some insight. Go into some physics and study this, how the laws are governing. Every action is, brain states are particle physics. You have to go to that level. Otherwise, we think, I decide my action. No, according to physicalism, no, it's a brain functioning. And brain function is a physical functions. And those brains were made, those states came because of other physical functions. And interaction with teachers, others, and they had their own brain functions. And they were caused by some other brain functions and other weather conditions. So when you bring all them into the context, you cannot get out of determinism. It's a very compelling argument. It's not me who is bringing that. Even the best physicists in the world keep silent when this argument is brought. Yes, what you're saying is correct. Then what happens? You cannot punish someone for a crime. It has to happen. The legal system breaks down. The political system breaks down. There's no hope in life. That's what I was emphasizing on. Right? So finally, before we conclude the talk, because I talk about causality, right? Causality leads to determinism. Even you bring the consciousness into the context, if consciousness is also determined by causes, cause and effect, if things are based by causes, it leads to a deterministic world. If the consciousness is also arising and happening, existing based on causes, it itself leads to a deterministic future, the conscious realm. And if the consciousness, existence of consciousness is determined, its interaction with the matter is also determined. Then you are still in the deterministic view. The only way to get out of it, have you ever thought about that? I always use a word. I used a word called causal agent few times. What does it mean? Even though the consciousness arises due to causes, it has to have a capacity to make decisions. And those decisions are not entirely under the influence of causes. Only then you can come out of determinism. That's called the theory of causal agent. What does it mean? A given outcome. Two people, 1 and 2. I hope it can be seen. Okay, no, it cannot be. Anyway, this is 1, this is 2. Someone comes and starts shooting. What are the outcomes? What are the reactions that he may do? He's a Buddhist, believes in a rebirth. He doesn't believe in a rebirth, for example. What are the outcomes? He may shout, he may fight, he may run away, he may settle down, okay, accept the death. Possible, right? Some do accept, okay. And settle his mind for the next rebirth. None of the Buddhists want to be born in a bad realm, right? Okay. Right? Settle your mind for the next rebirth. So 4 or 5 outcomes with the settling of the mind. Now with the atheist, he also said the same consequence, same scenario. He may run, he may shout, he may fight, he may face the death peacefully, but he will never settle his mind for rebirth, right? So decisions, why these decisions were lacking and his decision was there? Because of his view. So decisions are determined, or decisions are caused by the causes. Because of the view, he made such a decision. Obvious. But he had the choice. That's the point here. How would the Buddha explain this? According to given his mental status, at this moment, there is a high probability that he would fight. There's a 35% of a probability that he would shout. There's a 5% of a probability that he would face the death, expecting and preparing his mind for the next life. But if he came out of a meditation retreat, Buddha would say, okay, now the probabilities have changed. He has a 15% of a probability of facing the death peacefully. But still, in given, causes change the probabilities, causes change the choices, but still, even there was the 5% probability, what I'm advocating is, you can crucify this and put me into a big trouble, and luckily time is not allowing you to do that, right? I'll not be able to explain. There's an explanatory gap here. I have to admit that. Given the consciousness rising and falling, I'll be in a big trouble, and this is very unappealing in philosophy. I have to admit that. The only way to get out of determinism is, even though there's a 5% possibility, what was going to happen? If this person made effort, if the consciousness was working, don't think I'm not advocating a self. It's a different topic. The consciousness could have taken any of the choices, but the 5% choice was very hard. The choice was there. Only then, if this possibility is there, not probability, if this possibility of probable choices is there, only then you can get out of determinism. So I'll conclude my talk. In order to get rid of determinism, you have to have a non-material consciousness, or a non-material element. And then just having the non-material element would not suffice you to get out of determinism. If that consciousness is also caused by causes only, still you fall into determinism. It has to have the decision-making capacity. Still you fall into determinism if all the decisions are completely decided by causes. I'm not talking about 100% rational, we call it, I forgot the name. Libertarian view. No. It's almost determined. But there is a slight free will. So consciousness can make decisions, but if all those decisions are completely under the influence of causes, still you fall into determinism. The only way out is, those choices, we put them in probabilities. And there's a very huge tendency that you would go into one type of a choice. But if you make effort, if you strive, that's why Buddha said, we are driving towards sensuality. You strive, effort is necessary. Cetana is necessary. If you strive hard, you can change the course of your life. Viryavato kinnama nasijjati. If you have the effort, what can't you achieve? These are only possible if you can change, if you have a choice in your life. There is another view called libertarianism, that you can make any choice, but that seems to be too much of a radical view. So according to my opinion, Buddhism falls into this type of a thing, and so it doesn't fall into determinism. Thank you for listening, and hope you enjoyed it, and I'd like to share all the merits because we have to conclude our talk. With this merit of discussing Dhamma and sharing Dhamma and having insights, may all of us be able to have more insights into the deep truth, and we'll be able to finally attain the truth and finally eradicate all the defilements laying in our consciousness, and also attain the full liberation from out of all the rebirths. And also we share all these merits with our deceased ones. May they rejoice on our merits, and if they are suffering in woeful realms, may they be free from the agony and attain this bliss. And also if they have attained bliss, may their bliss be enhanced by all these merits. And all the deities, may they rejoice on this merit, and may they protect the sasana and enjoy increase their divine pleasures, and finally attain the liberation. May all the beings, whoever possible, rejoice on our merits and attain the supreme bliss. So we shall recite gathas and transfer merits, and also special merits to all the organizers who organized this event in this elderly center, right? Elderly Center in Sydney, and who took a lot of measures to prepare this, to arrange this accommodations, and also who support us through this journey, throughout this journey in Australia. So may all of them be part of this Dhamma Dana done by myself. So may everyone finally enjoy the bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Idang wo nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang wo nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang wo nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Akasatthā ca bhummattā devānāgā mahiddhikā puññantang anumoditva ciran rakkantu sambuddha sāsanang. Akasatthā ca bhummattā devānāgā mahiddhikā puññantang anumoditva ciran rakkantu sambuddha desanang. Akasatthā ca bhummattā devānāgā mahiddhikā puññantang anumoditva ciran rakkantu sambuddha sāvakang. Ciran rakkantu tvan sada idam imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satan samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo Ran samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya imina punya kammena mame bala samagamo satan samagamo hotu yava nibbana pattiya idamme punya kammang asavakkaya vahang hotu idamme punya kammang asavakkaya vahang hotu idamme punya kammang asavakkaya vahang hotu sabba dukkha pamuncatu. ආශිර්වාද කරන වන්දනා කරගන්න. සබ්බීතියෝ විවජ්ජන්තු සබ්බ රෝගෝ විනස්සතු මාතේ භවත්වන්තරායෝ සුඛී දීඝායුකෝ භව අභිවාදන සීලිස්ස නිච්ඡං බුද්ධාපචායිනෝ චත්තාරෝ ධම්මා වඩ්ඩන්ති ආයුවන්නෝ සුඛං බලං ආයුරාරෝග්‍ය සම්පත්ති සග්ග සම්පත්ති මේවච අතෝ නිබ්බාන සම්පත්ති ඉමිනාතේ සමිජ්ජතු. සුප්පත් වේවා, දීර්ඝායුෂ වේවා, යහපතක් වේවා, ඔබලට සනසිල්ලක්ම වේවා.
I've been asked to give a closing word of thanks. First of all, thank you to the organizers for making this event possible. And thank you, Bhante, for your very valuable talk. I'm actually someone who studied physics at uni, and I really appreciated how you grounded your talk in modern theories of physics and also philosophy. It was a really fresh perspective. I don't think many Bhantes have really broached this topic before. So I really appreciated that, and I think everyone will walk away from this talk feeling the same. So thank you very much, Bhante, for your valuable talk and leaving us with lots of food for thought. Theravada Saranai.
Theravada Saranai.
Theravada Saranai හැමෝටම. Can you all help us actually tidying the place up and putting all the chairs where it belongs? Some of the chairs will come here and some of the chairs will come there. The rest will go into the other room. So can you please help us doing that? Thank you very much.